Well, I'm sure you know, as of next week, Cheltenham 2025 is upon us. The centrepiece of the National Hunt calendar has swung around once again. And to preview and discuss, happy to say Michael Verney, who was and will once again be there for the Irish Independent, is with us. And also a voice very familiar to lots of you, Cornelius Lysaght, for 30 plus years, give or take, voice of the horse racing coverage on BBC and 5 Live. He was their horse racing correspondent 01 to 2020, broadcaster and journalist, and we're delighted he's with us. Michael, hello.
How's it going, Joe?
Cornelius, you're very welcome.
Thank you very much.
Can I start broad topic first of all, fellas? I don't want to overly emphasise this point because I think at 1:20 on Tuesday, this conversation could feel a touch redundant. But I was wondering if the sense of buzz or excitement, just in my own little echo chamber, you know, we're all kind of have different experiences, was maybe short on previous Cheltenham editions. And I checked in with a few people who really love their racing. So one of them said, understandably, and it's probably more felt over here, Cornelius, but Mick, you'd be well aware, someone said Michael O'Sullivan's passing is still really on people's minds, and it's hard to get too excited or ebullient about the whole thing. Another who's a massive racing fan, it shocked me, said he was a little bit indifferent this year. He found the quality of last year's festival to be poor, and he's not sure it's in a great place. And then a third person I just checked in with just sort of said that, you know, there are fewer human stories than there used to be, and racing has, you know, too much of it now is how many winners will Willie Mullins or JP McManus get. And that feels less kind of vital. And there's a repetition to it as well. It feels less seismic when there's yet another Willie Mullins winner as opposed to a fairy tale story. That's not to mention the Irish dominance as well and the Press Free Cup and other issues. But Michael, I'm curious, is that resonating with you, or in your world is this like Christmas is here and it's as good as ever?
No, it doesn't maybe feel like other Cheltenhams. Not yet anyway, Joe. When it gets to the time and you get on I always love the Monday evening in Cheltenham, because I always think Monday up until 1:20 on the Tuesday, everybody knows everything. We all have the winners, and until 1:25, then we're all wrong. Most of us are wrong, and you're on the back foot. But there's always a great buzz, I find, in that 24 hours. It's definitely been a bit more of a slow burner this year. As you said, like a massive cloud over Irish racing and jump racing in general, with poor Michael O'Sullivan passing a couple of weeks back, and like even the Supreme is named after him this year. It's the Michael O'Sullivan Supreme Novices Hurdle, and it's you know, it's surreal to think that only 2 years ago he was winning that race, and then winning another race on the card, the Fred Winter with Jazzy Matty, and that is hard for a lot of people to get their heads around. And I'm sure the weighing room has been a strange place for the past couple of weeks. But I think when Cheltenham comes, once it hits that Monday, the buzz will really be kicking in. It hasn't probably kicked in yet, and I'm no more than Cornelius. You're knee deep in features and knee deep in previews and trying to get all your ducks in a row. But I think once we hit Monday evening / Tuesday morning, I think there'll be a fair buzz, as there always is.
Yeah,
I think the thing about Michael O'Sullivan is that there is this big cloud of sadness over jump racing as a whole, and felt really strongly on both sides of the Irish Sea. But you're right, we'll get to Monday night and we'll be thinking of Michael and thinking of the O'Sullivan family, but also thinking of celebrating this great opportunity of celebrating his brilliant talent that was snuffed out so early in his life. So there's that. The other points you make, though, I think are very relevant. I think it's a massive year for Cheltenham. Cheltenham Racecourse, the Cheltenham event as well, because last year's it was a little bit, it left plenty of people indifferent. People felt, despite some magnificent performances by Galopin Des Champs, by other horses as well, there were some notable absentees last year. There are some notable absentees this year as well. But there was a lot of grumbling last year as well. People are just sort of miffed about, pricing, miffed about car parks, just miffed about an event that perhaps used to really sort of sparkle and hasn't necessarily moved as fast with the times as people would have liked. So I think there's a new management this year. There's a new boss man at the racecourse, a guy called Guy Lavender. There's a new head of the jockey club, woman called Dido Harding. And hopefully they really concentrated on some of those grumbles from last year, some of those issues, most of which were fairly valid. And that will improve things. The other thing about the human interest stories you make, and it's all about Willie, and it to a large extent it is about Willie. And if you think that's felt in Ireland, it's felt even more on this side of the Irish Sea. That Irish dominance, which is good in many respects because it shows the brilliance of Irish racing, but does give people less to cling on to. And the fact is, quite a number of the horses that come over are not as familiar to a large percentage of the crowd as they would have been in the past, and that is something that everyone's having to try and get their heads around. But you're right, there will be a buzz. The buzz is going already, and on especially when people turn up in the Cotswolds on Sunday, Monday, and the sun is probably still going to be out. It's out at the moment. The whole area is looking absolutely fantastic. I'm sure that things will really start buzzing. Though people will still be saying, "Gosh, how many winners is Mullins going to have?" Did you notice there was a sort of little bit of confidence, particularly when Sir Gino was racing? Some other results had gone well. Constitution Hill was right back on his game, and there was a little bit of confidence about the British total. The home side's total started to grow. I think it was overconfidence personally. I think if the Brits get to 12 out of 28, it will be an astonishing result.
Right.
I would have thought 9 or 10 is probably more likely.
We'll come to that in just a moment. On the experience of last year, the attendance record for Cheltenham was set in 2022. It must be emphasised. And you're talking 280,000 people across the 4 days in 22. And that was the first fully post-COVID one. So there was probably pent-up demand to get out there and experience life again.
Because it was big the year after Foot and Mouth cancelled 2001. It was massive in 2002 because there was that sort of pent-up frustration that hadn't taken place.
I'll bet it was. So 280,000 in 22. And then the following year, it dropped 40,000 to 240,000. And then last year, it dropped another 10,000 to 230,000. So you're down 50,000 in 2 years from the high point. Listening to Cheltenham racecourse officials, they're not expecting 25 to be a massive reverse of that trend. And so looking back on last year, there was obviously a cost of living crisis at that point. It was interesting that the hospitality, so I mean, the where the money was, that was sold out. It was actually the cheaper tickets which weren't shifting as readily, and people have cited the ticket prices, which are going to be frozen at the 2024 level for this time around. Also, the group discount. You now only need 6 people for a group discount. Last year you needed 15. There's still, complaints. It's £7.50 for a pint, but
you get a pint for £7.50. You've done well.
Yeah, probably. But then
it's more than £8. I think
is it?
That's,
is it?
This is these make London prices look like like cheapies. Though, funny enough, the Racing Post, the industry newspaper, last week compared the prices at Cheltenham to other major events, whether it's football or cricket or Wimbledon, tennis, etc. And actually, Cheltenham doesn't do at all badly.
Well, I was just going to say that alcohol prices are a scandal at any event you attend, so that's not unique to Cheltenham. Accommodation does seem to be very in demand and expensive. So they have moved to try and make the experience better, Michael. So Cheltenham, they've changed the programme a touch. So, for instance, the Grade 1 Turner's Novice Chase, the Cross Country Chase, the National Hunt Chase all switched to handicap format, and the National Hunt Chase is open to professional jockeys. They have made upgrades to the parking facilities because, I think with the water, you were waiting a long time for a tractor to take your car out of the car park, which is no fun. It's not exactly a premium experience. And they've made moves to make accommodation locally a bit more accessible. So it seems, you don't want to overemphasize how big the drop-off is, but it seems they're trying to make the event a little bit more affordable, a little bit more accessible, a nicer experience for people.
Yeah, it definitely seems like that. Even just on the race programming point of view, a lot of the top trainers would bemoan the fact that there is less quality at Cheltenham now because immediately if you're turning a grade 1 into a handicap, the quality will decrease. But I suppose something else that you mentioned there about the human interest stories, they're probably far more likely to appear now, because handicaps will give smaller trainers, smaller owners the possibility of having Cheltenham runners maybe that they wouldn't have had before. And from a betting point of view, you're going to have handicaps with probably minimum 20 runner fields, good prices, which are attractive to kind of punters as well. Not your odds on kind of shots, which we've had a lot of in grade 1s, and we're going to have a decent cohort of them next week as well. But from that point of view, yeah, I don't mind really the changes in the race programming too much. It seems like it's the bigger trainers that have all the options that are the ones maybe bemoaning it more. I probably think it adds a little bit more intrigue, and there's probably more of a likelihood of an unusual name popping up, or something that we maybe wouldn't have discussed if it was in a grade 1 format. It's kind of strange on the hospitality point of view. When you're working in media, it's one of the rare perks of media that you don't have to, it's one of the few things I don't have to go and do this and that and it's sorted for you. But I just know from chatting to people the last couple of years that you're very, very lucky to get accommodation at anyway reasonable prices. And just something, Joe, and as Cornelius was talking there, I just thought of it. Cheltenham, the GA are going down a similar road to Cheltenham, and you cannot just expect people to turn up to events and keep charging more and more if you're not giving them more and more, i.e. services at grounds, etc. Everything is just costing more, and you can't just keep expecting people to turn up. The service has to be top class, and you have to adapt with the times. And in fairness to Cheltenham, they have adapted. They've seen the red flags. They've seen the warning lights of attendance dropping fairly drastically, and they've moved very, very quickly to arrest that slide. It probably, if they can just get up a small bit from last year, I'd say they'd be happy enough, and then start building again. But at least they've made the appropriate changes, because even capping the attendance Friday was an absolute zoo for a long, long time. It was just too many people. There was just too many people there. I think it's capped at, is it 67.5 now?
Yeah.
I think it's capped at. So there could have been 75 or upwards there on a Friday, and it is not even I know from a media point of view, it's not an enjoyable experience. It's like sardines moving around the place. So at least they've made that a lot more enjoyable as well. And hopefully, and Cornelius will probably tell you as well, it's funny, a lot of UK punters have decided to make their racing trip, National Hunt Trip of the year, to the Dublin Racing Festival because of, and I know Dublin doesn't seem very affordable to us, but it is a lot more affordable maybe than Cheltenham has been in recent years, and that's probably a trend that has emerged too. But I'd imagine they will arrest the slide as regards race scores this year, and they've made appropriate changes, and it will start building in time again. But I wouldn't expect it to rise too drastically this year.
Well, no, interestingly, plenty of tickets have been. It was billed as you've still got an opportunity to go, but you could look at it in another direction. The ticket sales are not quite as good as they could be. It's also, we don't want to go on about this too long, but the other thing is, it's such a, as you call it, a zoo. It's such a bum fight that it's inconceivable 5, 8, 10 years ago that you'd have heard of people going to Tenerife to enjoy the sunshine in Tenerife and then go into a bar or into a betting shop or whatever and watch the racing in the afternoon. But that is supposedly what people are doing. The zoo aspect, the bum fight aspect has become too much. But you're absolutely right. And it's not just racing. You mentioned GAA, Twickenham, the rugby union. The fact is that too many people who are mad keen on their racing, mad keen on their Gaelic football, on their tennis, whatever it happens to be, have been taken for granted by the authorities, who just squeezed and thought, well, they love it so much, they'll keep on coming, even if we stick the prices up. And finally, people have hit back and said, well, actually, no, if you're not prepared to give us a drink at a decent price, allow us to go to the loo when we want to, stop us getting stuck in the car parks, well, you can get stuffed and we'll go and do it our way. And that is one of racing's great advantages, is also on occasions a great disadvantage. The TV channels are so good, particularly the specialist TV channels are so good that actually, who was I talking to? I was talking to Michael Hurrigan, the trainer, a former trainer now, retired yesterday. He said, I'm not going to go because I want to go and make a cup of coffee. I'm going to sit at home, make a cup of coffee when I want one, pause the TV when I want to go to the loo, etc., etc., etc. I think the punters are to a large extent hitting back, and all authorities across sport, Cheltenham unquestionably included, need to remember that.
Yeah, it's a great point. The Irish dominance you mentioned, Willie Mullins to the fore. 12 of the 14 Grade 1 contests last year went their way, the Irish way. Willie Mullins, 8 of those 12, which was extraordinary. I know Nicky Henderson in particular, the English expected to mount a slightly stiffer challenge this time around. So results from the last couple of years, last year 18-9, year before 18-10, year before 18-10. The nadir for the English was 2021, 23-5, like almost prompted a BHA review group. The last time there was a draw was 2019.
It should have prompted a BHA review group, but it didn't.
Oh, I thought it did.
If I'd been running the British Horse Racing Authority that year, and those numbers were astonishing, I think even if it was all sort of slightly lip service, I'd have got some cameras together on the Monday after Cheltenham and said, these numbers aren't great, are they? We've got to at least look and see if we can work out where we are going wrong, if indeed we are going wrong, or it's just bad luck and the way the pendulum swings. But one of the great things about the BHA in recent years is that even if they have cared behind closed doors, they haven't indicated they care.
All right. I read they had set up a review group. But I read they had set up a review group, but obviously not.
Well, they did. It was a review. When you set up a review, it's kicking into the long grass a bit, isn't it? I wanted them on the front to mix my sporting metaphors. I wanted them on the front foot and actually saying, look, we are properly rolling up our sleeves, trying to work out how we could do better. But there are so many other ways. They should be looking at how they can improve the profile of racing. The fact is, the mainstream media, whether it's TV, whether it's radio, whether it's newspapers, whether it's websites, certainly in the UK, is indifferent to racing now. And has anyone attempted, I don't know what the answer is, but has anyone even showed that they care? Things don't feel as good as they should be. So we'll get to Cheltenham and there'll be that feel-good factor at Cheltenham, which will mask so many other problems. In my opinion.
Yeah, well, 19 was the last time it was a draw, and then 15 is the last time United Kingdom beat Ireland. And
Henderson had about 5 winners, did he? He had a lot of winners that year.
This is, a British event. A majority of attendees want British success. Or certainly, I suppose, Michael, you want the Pressbury Cup to be a thing. It's an extra layer. It's a talking point. You feel a lot better if you win 15-12 than 23-5. It can start to feel a little bit hollow at a certain point. So Julie Harrington, who's the British Horse Racing Authority CEO last year, she came out and said this is damaging for the sport. What's your sense of this? Why has this happened? Will this be reversed anytime soon? And there is also that strange thing that, it's Willie Mullins trained and it's Richie Rich owns. So it's not quite, it's a slightly odd starting point anyway for Pressbury Cup when it's Irish trained is not necessarily Irish through and through.
Yeah, the Pressbury Cup is a funny one. I've never really heard anybody within racing talking too much about the Pressbury Cup. Not really, but it's like trainers, jockeys, anything like that. I don't think there's that much great pride comes from it. Definitely not at 23-5. If you're winning maybe by 1 or something like that, there's a little maybe a clenched fist or something like that. But a lot of it, Joe, is to do with the powerful owners within the national hunt game. The vast majority are leaning towards Ireland at the minute and leaning towards Willie Mullins in particular. In recent years, you'd have obviously the likes of Joe Donnelly, who has plenty of horses with Nicky and horses in England, obviously the likes of Lulamba and a couple more, but they've started leaning towards Ireland an awful lot more. Richie as well. Obviously have the double green as well of Munir and Suede. They're more of an Irish presence than they would have had maybe 4 or 5 years ago. And the thirst is, you look at Cheltenham, you look at the biggest jumps meeting of the year, and who's front and centre? Willie Mullins is nearly always front and centre, and it's like people cannot get their horses to him quick enough. And that's just that's just a sign of his genius, obviously, and people are investing their millions and their fate in him to get them to the big dance and get them their day in the sunshine. And invariably, it does happen. His strike rate is remarkable at all the big spring festivals and the big meetings, and Cheltenham in particular. He obviously reached the century of winners last year. Like, if you had said to someone that 15 or 20 years ago somebody was going to reach a century of winners at Cheltenham, like, you would have been laughed out of the building. It's just regularly you're thinking 6, 7, 8. That's, I think 7 or 8 is probably nearly an average for him at this stage in recent years. And a lot of the big influential owners have leaned more towards Ireland than England. Then you also have the quality of, as a result of that, the quality of horse in Britain has decreased. You have trainers maybe swerving Cheltenham and looking at an Aintree or looking at a Sandown as a possibility to avoid some big Irish hitters as well. So it's kind of funny in that regard. And like, I think outside of Willie Mullins, even the Irish challenge has gotten stronger in many ways. Gordon Elliott's always going to be strong. Henry de Bromhead is always going to be strong at Cheltenham. Joseph O'Brien has a small but select team, and a lot of them will be well fancied. Gavin Cromwell has emerged massively in the last couple of years. He had a couple of winners last year, obviously, the 2 JP horses, and he'll have plenty of horses on the premises as well. And that's not to mention a couple of other kind of small trainers as well. So the focus will be on Willie Mullins, but the Irish challenge, even underneath that, is, yeah, I'd say frighteningly strong.
And Cornelius, the last one before we get into some of the races on this.
Yeah.
Julie Harrington, like I said, called it damaging for the sport. And she said, we're trying to, do lots of things to counter this in various measures. And she talked about £4 million extra in prize money across the year to incentivise, I guess, investment in British racing. How big a problem is this? What's the core reason this has happened? And is it likely to change anytime soon?
Well, I don't think it's anything to do with prize money. It is a cycle which is looking like a very long cycle. The fact is, a whole lot of Irish horses that were once being sold stayed in Ireland. The trainers that Michael has mentioned, they all demonstrated themselves, and indeed others, to be very good. They really got the bandwagon rolling, and then people, very wealthy people on either side of the Irish Sea, who saw how good these Irish trainers were at handling, quite often expensively purchased, but how brilliant they were at handling the horses, particularly when they were at Cheltenham. They all want a bit of that action. So therefore, there are business people from across these islands, both sides of the Irish Sea, and indeed from elsewhere, who wanted to support these trainers who were doing so consistently well. That's not to say they thought that Henderson and Nichols and everyone else will suddenly become a bad trainer. No one suggested that. But these guys who were year in, year out having the winners were people that they wanted to support. And at the moment, it's inconceivable that pendulum will swing. However, just looking and reminding myself here of how, and this is a long time ago now, admittedly, but in the 1980s, when Britain was completely dominant at Cheltenham, and these numbers are really fascinating to look at. 2 Irish winners in 1985. There would have been 18 races probably at the time. 2 in 1985, 4 in 1986, 1 in 1987, 1 in 1988, and none in 1989. So at that stage, it was inconceivable that the pendulum would ever swing the other way. And look how far it has swung. So at the moment, it's inconceivable it will swing away from Ireland. But it will do, because somebody like, it's not going to be Nicky Henderson now because he's over 70. It could be Nichols, but he's over 60. It'll very likely be Dan Skelton, who's a guy of sort of 40, who's demonstrated himself over the last 2 or 3 years to be doing particularly well at the festival. And there's probably somebody that you and I have never heard of.
Yeah.
I think they're probably born, but they're probably, right low on the ladder now, who will become the next Dan Skelton. So it all is not lost. But at the moment, it's inconceivable to see how that pendulum is going to swing.
Yeah, no, fair point.
And of course, the Irish guys have got to screw it up, which at the moment it is not going to happen as well. I thought for a second we were just going to be Willie Mullins, Gordon Elliott, Henry de Bromhead, Gavin Cromwell, but then Michael mentioned Joseph O'Brien. I think Joseph O'Brien's going to have a really good week next week. We'll come on to some names in a second, but I could see him pushing De Bromhead out of third place in terms of success.
Okay.
Though De Bromhead invariably does extremely well at Cheltenham, and Cromwell is more and more strong, but it'll probably be Mullins one and Gordon Elliott too.
Yeah, Skelton, who you mentioned, had 4 winners last year, so he's on the rise. And
I sat next to his brother on a Cheltenham panel last night. Anyway, by the end of the evening, he talked himself into 9 winners, but I don't think it'll be quite that many. But they do think that they will have several. Okay.
So the champion hurdle is certainly worth mentioning, and then Cornelius can take us through the other 27 races and give us the winners. So this is Constitution Hill, hoping to see off brighter days ahead. Constitution Hill, trained by Nicky Henderson, owner Michael Buckley, remains unbeaten in his career. So, as we know, missed last year so dramatically. Last year was a bad year for Nicky Henderson, very, very unlucky. So missed last year, but the year before that, of course, won the champion hurdle by 9 lengths, and in 2022 broke the track record in a 22-length win in the Supreme Novices. Has been out of action for 366 days. We saw him at Kempton at Christmas, where he looked just fine, and so he's 10 for 10. Brighter days ahead, has 1 defeat on her CV. Jigginstown, trained by Gordon Elliott, and Lossy Mouth is in there as well. Willie Mullins trained, and he thinks she's tailor-made for this race. It's funny in Constitution Hill, a few of the kind of harder to please types are saying, well, spare me the Hurricane Fly Isterbrack comparisons with 10 runs. Let's show me a bit more before I get too excited. But Constitution Hill, the one to beat here, Michael, to what extent?
Yeah, he definitely is the one to beat. He obviously, there was question marks when he came back at Christmas, and Lossy Mouth didn't run particularly well and was off her feet early in that race at Kempton, the Christmas hurdle, and she was still within around 2.5 lengths of him. But the longer he has stayed fully fit, he obviously got another run in at Cheltenham. It was a glorified kind of racecourse gallop nearly, and then he had the gallop at Kempton a couple of weeks ago.
Sorry to interrupt. Nicky Henderson called the recent gallop at Kempton as frightening.
Yeah, I love that stuff, because Nicky really feeds into the hyperbole around him. But the longer he has stayed fit, and there's been no clouds of doubt or anything like that around him, I think the firmer he becomes at the head of the market. And again, like I'd be firm belief, it's the same with kind of any team or individual, until they're beaten and there's serious signs of chinks in their armour, you'd be staying with them. But brighter days ahead adds a fascinating kind of element to it. Obviously, we didn't know whether they were going to roll the dice or not. The Mayor's Hurdle is a much easier target for them to win, for Gigginstown to win, and Michael O'Leary loves winning races no matter what races they are at Cheltenham. But they did, I think Gordon Elliott would have gotten his way in that regard. He said as far back as Down Royal, when she made her season and reappearance, that I think she's a champion hurdle horse, and he's been chipping away in the background, I'd say. And her 39th romp in the Neville Hotel's hurdle over Christmas, when Stateman, the defending champion hurdle winner, was well in behind, I'd say probably helped to cement her place in the market. She gets £7. She's incredibly quick. She'll have a pacemaker in. King and Kingsfield is in to set up the pace for her. When he falls off, maybe with coming down into the dip, maybe with the guts of about 2 hurdles to jump, you'd imagine she takes it up and she will pose questions to Constitution Hill. Hopefully questions that haven't been posed to him before. But I still think he wins. He's a remarkable racehorse. As you say, 10 from 10. Has not really put a foot wrong on the race course. Cheltenham has been his playground in the last couple of years. Like that Supreme that you said, where he broke the course record, was just unbelievable. A certain John Bond, who's odds-on favourite for the champion chase, was beaten by 22 lengths behind him that day. I still think he's going to be very, very hard to beat, and I think she adds great spice to it. Lossy Mouth, on the other hand, I would have had Lossy Mouth firmly in the calculations until she fell in the Irish champion hurdle, and I think 4% of horses, it's only 4% of horses who have been either pulled up or fallen on their previous race have prevailed at the Cheltenham Festival. And it just takes, psychologically, I'd say it would have taken potentially a lot over, as it normally does. It would take a lot out of a human. It would take a lot out of a horse. So I think it's Constitution Hill, but I think we could be in for one hell of a race, and it sets up the week lovely. It's such a tasty duel to be looking forward to that Tuesday.
That's an amazing stat, Michael. I didn't know that. 4% after they fall, not as good.
Yeah. It's how much confidence would you have? Would a horse have, or would a trainer have in a horse who was fallen, going to the Cheltenham Festival? I think Corbett's Cross was one of the horses that booked that trend last year. He didn't necessarily fall as made kind of an unseated kind of a job, so it was less of an impact. But yeah, there's rarely a horse throws in a very, very bad run. Definitely not in a grade one anyway. A bad run before running in a big grade one. So there are question marks. There are even question marks at the minute about her participation in it, that she could opt for the Mares Hurdle instead, which is a much easier target now the Brighter Days Ahead isn't there. But Willie Mullins has said all along that this was a 2-year project to get to the Champion Hurdle. She won the Mares last year. But again, Willie likes to win races at Cheltenham, and if he's assessing which is the easier race to win, hands down it's the Mares Hurdle at the minute. But hopefully, for racing's sake, she turns up and makes it a three-way dance.
Cornelius, Constitution Hill.
And it wasn't just a tumble.
Yeah.
Zepistan, it was a proper fall as well. I concur with all of that, really. There's this horse, King of Kingsfield, who's the pacemaker for Brighter Days Ahead, but could just end up benefiting Constitution Hill as well. The horse that I don't think we mentioned so far is State Man, who is just getting to a position in the betting where people are thinking, well, if you've got 8 runners, and which you hopefully will have, you've got 8 runners, then State Man at say 6-7 to 1, something like that, is actually a nice each way bet. In terms of the principles that Michael said, he's barely put a foot wrong, Constitution Hill. It was in this sort of glorified racecourse gallop at Cheltenham the other day where there were hearts in mouths when he made a mistake late on. But if anything, a horse like that, and just as importantly, a jockey like Nico de Boinville will have learned from that. He sort of blamed himself for not being completely sort of across what could potentially happen. So I'm sure they'll have learned from that. Is he still as good as he was? People keep pointing to performances and say they're not as good as they were, but he hasn't really needed to be that good. Henderson, what do you say? He said frightening, did he, the other day?
Yeah.
That's one of his favourites. Another word, and he delivers them really well. Another of his favourite words is brutal. He really delivers brutal really well.
As in brutally good or brutally bad?
Well, I think it covers all possibilities. It can be used in any context. But no, he's 10 from 10. He's got to concede that weight to the filly's allowance, the mare's allowance. But the vibes one is getting from Team Hendo at the moment is that they're pretty confident everything is going to be okay. But Constitution Hill, Brighter Days Ahead, a pacemaker, maybe Lossy Mouth, State Man, maybe we can push it up towards 8, and State Man could just be an interesting each way shout, being himself the reigning champion in the absence of Constitution Hill last time. But interesting.
Okay.
There'll be a lot of hearts in mouths during that race.
Okay.
And Hendo will probably be saying to everyone, oh, these minutes going up to the Champion Hurdle, they're brutal.
Brutal. So a lot of the hopes and dreams of the week ahead, people will be setting themselves up for a good week on Constitution Hill on day one. That's kind of the pressure. Bookended, of course, by the Gold Cup on Friday, which is really significant race historically, as much as everything else, more so than it often would be, because, as you said, Cornelius, Galopin Des Champs is going for 3 in a row, trained by Willie Mullins. 2-time winner of the event, claimed the Gold Cup in 23 by 7 lengths, and then defended last year, beating Jerry Cologne by 3.5 lengths. It's worth mentioning as well, Paul Townend will go level with Pat Taff as a 4-time winner of the Gold Cup if Galopin Des Champs does the business. Taff won 3 of his 4 on Arkle, 64, 65 and 66. So there are echoes of Arkle here for Galopin Des Champs. I think
he's going for 5, Joe.
5?
Album Photo won a couple. Yeah.
2 on Album Photo and 2 on Galopin so far.
Yes, but Galopin going for 3. But yes, sorry, Townend's on a hell of a run. So Ruby Walsh said of Galopin Des Champs, he doesn't need good luck to win the race. He just needs average luck. He's the best horse. He will win the race. What you don't need is bad luck. He's got a great mentality, solid jumper, has a turn of foot. Try and pick a hole in him. So, Cornelius, pick a hole in Galopin Des Champs for us.
Not possible. That was awesome at Leopardstown the other day. What he's so far he's what is he? He's 3 from 4 at Cheltenham and probably should be 4 from 4. But for the full, it's pretty much impossible. And I think the one horse here, just looking at the possible opponents, Banbridge could just be underestimated. He's trained by Joseph O'Brien. He won the King George, the 6th chase at Christmas at Kempton. He'll love conditions if they stay, or if what is anticipated turns out to be the going on the day. So he could be a thorn in the side of Galopin Des Champs. But looking at the others, just the opponents, Montestar, you can probably ignore the last run, but still probably not good enough. Corbett's Cross, conditions would be a question mark, but he's clearly been trained by Emmett Mullins, nephew of, with this race in mind. Grey Dawning doesn't run. Long Presse surely can't win. Ahoy Signor. Hewitt, will like the conditions. The real whacker might be in there as well. He seems to like the test of the Gold Cup. I think we're going to have enough. I don't think, people were talking the other day about 4 or 5 runners. I don't think it's going to be that small a number, but I think it's going to be enough for each way betting 1, 2, 3. But I think we are talking about the heritage of national hunt racing in these islands over this. When talking about 3-time winners of the Gold Cup, we're talking about Golden Miller, who actually won 5 in the 1930s. We're talking about Cottage Rake in the late 40s, early 50s. We're talking about Arkle. We're talking about Best Mate. These are the real icons, the ones that when the journalists of 50, 60, 70 years' time will be reflecting, they'll be talking about these type of horses. And Galopin Des Champs will almost certainly be joining Golden Miller, Cottage Rake, Arkle and Best Mate as a 3-time winner. So did Ruby say you don't need good luck, you just don't need bad luck?
He just needs average luck. He just doesn't need bad luck.
I think he probably, because his average luck ran out the year when he fell at the last or fell late on. Apart from the possibility that Banbridge is underestimated, he'll win.
Yeah.
The thing about Banbridge as well, Cornelius, that makes it interesting is just an opponent that he hasn't ran against before. It's just you're still not it's been, his career is quite remarkable when you look at it. He was considered a 2.5 mile specialist, then won over 2 miles at Punchestown last year, then stepped up to 3 miles for the first time in the King George. He's gone an extra 2 and a bit furlongs here up the hill as well. That's unknown. I know it's funny. Paul Townend will have ridden his main opponent on his last start because he rode him to victory in the King George, and he's obviously going to be riding Galopin. He didn't seem to think that he would get better for stepping up in trip, but he's the one kind of flying the ointment. And I remember watching Banbridge run, I think it was in the Ryanair a couple of years ago, and the ground was atrocious, and they probably shouldn't have run him, but ground would be perfect for him. Probably mightn't be ideal for Galopin Des Champs.
Absolutely.
Yeah, who's a proper national hunt horse, loves a good cut in the ground. So he's the one kind of potential fly in the ointment. But I think the thing to love about Galopin Des Champs is his durability. He just turns up every day. He runs at all the big. He goes to all the big dances. He performs to a very, very good level. He runs in the John Durkin. He runs Leopardstown Christmas in the Savills. He runs in the Irish Gold Cup. He runs in the Cheltenham Gold Cup, and he runs in the Punchestown Gold Cup every year for the last couple of years. And that's what he'll do next week, and then he'll go on to Punchestown again. And I think there's a potential with not a whole lot of Gold Cup candidates kind of jumping off the page for you at the minute, that if he were to win 3, yes, he'd be coming back as a 10-year-old, but he'd still be coming back with a fair chance of potentially doing 4. Let's hope, fingers crossed, we get the 3 first, because at the end of the day, lads, it's racing and anything can happen. He'd Bob Ollinger beating up a stick in the Turners a couple of years ago and pecked on Landon at the last. I don't know if you were watching that from the parade ring, Cornelius. I was in the parade ring and the big screen cut off.
Oh, that was it.
After the last. And all you could hear was, ooh, and we're like, okay, something bad's after happening, and the screen comes back on, and Townend is trying to grab a hold of him or whatever. But anything can happen in racing. Like I don't, if it's 2-5 or 4-7 or whatever it is, anything can happen. It just takes, like, El Fabiola was 2-9 the champion chase last year, hit a fence, like nearly took a fence out of the roots and was pulled up nearly straight away. You just don't know what can happen. He should win, but at the end of the day, it's Cheltenham and anything can happen.
I was feeling quite confident before you gave that answer. You've now. I'm looking right the way down the list. But
Cornelius, I wouldn't be remortgaging that lovely house you have behind you anyway. Not on a horse anyway.
No, but we mentioned Joseph O'Brien, trainer of Banbridge, and in practically the twinkling of an eye, going from top jockey to major international trainer, both over the jumps on the flat. He doesn't have that many jumpers. Practically, a very large proportion of his jumpers that he trains will be at Cheltenham. And, sorry, I'm probably going off script here, but you've got Banbridge probably, we assume in the Gold Cup, technically might run elsewhere, but hopefully in the Gold Cup. Solness in the Queen Mother for him. There's a horse called Nürburgring, which many people think is one of the best handicapped horses there. Home by the Lee and the Stayers. I think there could be quite a lot of celebrations on the hill late at the end of next week.
Michael, any stories you're looking out for, or individuals or jockeys or trainers, or a race that you'd like to mention before we wrap up?
Yeah, just something we were talking about earlier about all the big owners kind of going to Willie, but Willie Mullins will take anybody. Like syndicates, there's all sorts of different kind of people involved there. And I know from chatting to even a lot of guys involved in syndicates that have runners with him, like they are as well treated as any of the millionaires. And I know that for a fact. And one of the really interesting stories is in the Champion Bumper on the Wednesday. A mare for Willie Mullins called Bambino Fever, owned by Declan O'Connell and Willie Morgan. The horse was named Bambino Fever because both of their wives, who are very friendly, best friends since childhood, they were both pregnant at the time, have since had kids obviously, but there was a Bambino Fever at the time. And this is a really, really interesting horse. Declan wouldn't have had any interest in horses at all, really, apart from going to the races for social reasons. Willie Morgan would be steeped in racing. His grandfather actually rode in the Aintree Grand National alongside four of his brothers, which I think is a record. His family would have bred a lot of very good horses, the likes of Shattered Love, and his cousin Hugh is a professional jockey. That's a horse I'm really looking out for, and it's a horse that was bought for 30 grand, which is a lot, but not a lot in the grand scheme of things. And they're arriving to Cheltenham unbeaten, and I just love it. They're bringing 70 or 80 people, and it's just like I'm involved in a couple of horses, Joe, as I told you before, very, very small, but the only thing I can equate it to is like having a member of family playing like some sort of big game or a big sporting occasion, and you're fully invested. If someone says a bad word about your horse, like you'd hop on them, you know what I mean? Like you're totally emotionally invested. And he said like he didn't even know the Racing Post existed until 3 years ago, and now he's paying whatever amount of money for a sub to see if there's Bambino Fever is mentioned somewhere. This is the stories are still there. They might just be a little bit harder to find, should we say. So that's definitely one I'm having a look at. And just a horse to look at, Cornelius has mentioned him there, a horse called Nürburgring. It's in the Novices Handicap Chase on the Thursday, I think it is. Fourth in the Triumph Hurdle last year, went on to win the Galway Hurdle, has had 3 runs over fences, hasn't lit it up over fences, but he's £10 better off over fences than he is over hurdles. He's about 6-7 to 1 for that handicap chase on the Thursday, Novices Handicap Chase, and he has what I would say an outstanding chance for Joseph O'Brien.
Okay.
And they've been very clever, just making sure that they've campaigned him really cleverly so that he has a sensible weight. Just can I just throw in it's a technical point, but it's quite an important technical point in terms mentioned there of the Triumph Hurdle. Very often the Triumph Hurdle, which is for 4-year-olds only, the horses, the principal horses there, tend to have a blip the following year because they are young and they run their hearts out as 4-year-olds, and they take a bit of time to recover. Last year's Triumph Hurdle looks like it's been an exception to that rule. So they're now 5 years old. Madgeborough, who won the Triumph Hurdle, is favourite for the Arkle. Carguess, who was second, has got some fancy hopes. Salva, who finished third, has run okay. Nürburg, I can't pronounce it, Nürburgring, that is going to Cheltenham with a decent chance. Salvatore Mundi for the Supreme, Bunting, High Wind, Ethical Diamond. That was those 5-year-olds. The 4-year-olds of last year, now 5-year-olds, are a good bunch. And although it's been quite interesting I've been to a couple of Cheltenham previews where the host has said, I want at the end of the evening to have a nap, a dark horse, and a good thing you might get turned over. I think Madgeborough in the Arkle has got most votes for the inverted commas good thing that might get turned over, because his jumping he's pretty inexperienced, and his jumping isn't great. And people say, well, he's only 5, and there have been only 5-year-olds win the Arkle since 1970. But those 5-year-olds of this year are a good bunch. So there is a chance that Madgeborough will fly the flag for him. Equally, and on the panel I was on last night, which was Tuesday night, Harry Skelton was sitting next to me. So there was a lot of talk about the Arkle. They've got Low de Sud, the Skelton team, which is 4 from 4 in its races, against Madgeborough, which is 2 from 2. But they're quietly confident of success there because they've got more experience, they jump better, and they think Madgeborough might end up on the ground if his jumping lets him down. So that was a rather long-winded, roundabout, wordy, verbose way of saying the 5-year-olds may be better than the average 5-year-olds this year.
Michael, who's champion jockey?
It's probably unbackable, but you'd imagine it will be Townend, Paul Townend, realistically. Yeah, it's funny, Cornelius was saying, like 5 to 6 weeks ago before the Dublin Racing Festival, you're thinking maybe Nico de Boinville, he could have 3 or 4. If you're just looking at it, that was probably when Sir Gino was in, but he still has very good mounts in the likes of Constitution Hill, Lulamba, John Bon, who are all favourites for the races. I'd probably go for maybe just at a price, maybe someone like Jack Kennedy, who's only back in the saddle a week, and it's great to have him back because he's had that was his 6th leg break that he's had. Maybe someone like him. Elliot will have. I don't think Elliot will have 5 or 6 winners, but I think he'll have a lot of place horse, a lot of horses that would be right in the frame as he had last year. I think he's 7 place horses before he had a winner last year. I go for someone like Jack Kennedy, and obviously, yeah, Willie's going to be top trainer, barring.
Yeah, I wasn't going to ask.
He's going to be top trainer.
JP McManus top owner, barring something extraordinary.
Yeah. So McManus is going in well armed, Michael.
Oh, big time, Joe. Yeah, like in the last couple of years, he's really splashed the cash book in the last couple, or the checkbook in the last couple of years. We don't know a lot of these horses are bought privately. They're not bought at public auction, so we don't know. We'd all love to know. But he bought the New Lion off Darren Yates after he won the Shallow, but I think it was about 5 lengths, won really impressively. The figure that's been mentioned is about £1 million. Don't know whether that's sterling or euros, but in around there. He's got double figure favourites for Cheltenham races at this stage. He's 78 Cheltenham winners on the board. He had 5 last year. He'll probably have a couple of more. He's really, really well armed. It looks like, I don't know if he saw the celebrations around Willie making the century of winners last year, and he was like, that's something I'd like to have in the next 5 years. But he's given himself the best chance. Just off the top of my head, like you're looking at Stencil, Madgeborough, Crebley, It's on the Line. Like there's so many, and there's so many chances, and that's not even really mentioning horses and handicaps. And Kopek to me is a horse that hasn't ran in England or Ireland yet, and it's probably one of the most talked about horses in training that will run in one of the handicaps as well. And just going back through his history in recent days, by God, he loves the gamble at the Cheltenham Festival. So if you see those odds tumbling in the minutes before, I'd say try and get on as early as you can, and don't miss the boat.
Cornelius, so Paul Townend, the most likely champion jockey. To your eye, who's the best jockey in the business at the moment? Most talented?
Gosh, it's very hard. Very hard to, well, it's impossible to give a definitive answer. But clearly, Paul Townend and Jack Kennedy are 2 very, very talented riders in Ireland. Over here, the Bowen brothers. There'll be no James. Well, there probably won't be a James Bowen riding at the festival because he's likely to be suspended. Sean Bowen's riding brilliantly. Harry Cobden. Yeah, the standard. That people may say we're out of the golden era of Ruby Walsh and A.P. McCoy and Barry Geraghty and Davy Russell and all those kind of guys. But the standard is very, very high. It's impossible, in my opinion, to say someone is the best. There are a whole. I mentioned Nico de Boinville. Nico de Boinville must be about the coolest. He is such a good big race jockey. There are those who say I wouldn't much want him in a average handicap hurdle around Worcester on a cold Tuesday. But he's an absolutely brilliant jockey. Gavin Sheehan's another rider riding really well at the moment, and I'll probably miss somebody out. Harry Skelton is another. So there may not be, you can't have a golden era all the time, can you? There was that golden era with Ruby and AP and Barry Geraghty, Davy Russell, Noel Feely, Richard Johnson, Paul Carberry, all those type of guys. And there's a different era now. And the other thing, not relevant to Cheltenham, but if you are ever just got some time just to sort of leaf through who some of these jockeys are riding in Britain, once upon a time, they were mainly Irish and quite a lot of English. Now there are Irish, English, and these Welsh jockeys, absolutely unbelievable. The Bowen brothers, Ben Jones, we haven't mentioned Ben Jones and Penn Pauling. They're turning into a really strong combination. Jack Tudor, another Welsh guy going really strongly. Lorcan Williams as well. And there, as I say, there are probably others I've forgotten there.
Yeah.
So yeah, the standard is pretty good.
Yeah, and, Michael, in this post-glory era, after the likes of Walsh and Russell and AP, who's riding for your mortgage? One-off race.
Oh Lord, I wouldn't put anyone in that spot now, but I think that the standard is very, very good in Ireland at the minute. Like even a jockey he's a 5 pound claimer, Tiernan Power Roach should be someone that would be in big demand because he's going to be riding in handicaps and be able to take kind of a couple of pounds off whatever your chances, particularly if they're carrying big weights. Danny Gilligan's a brilliant jockey. Sam Ewing is 21. He's like a babyface assassin. He never put a foot wrong. While Jack Kennedy was out, I think he rode 5 Grade 1 winners while Jack Kennedy was out. I'd expect him to be in around the scene as well. But if it was someone, it depends. If someone's riding for your mortgage, it's like, what type of a horse is it? And are they a hold up or the front runner? It kind of depends. But Paul Townend has, he's just achieved so much, particularly in the last 5 or 6 years since Ruby retired. And something he always loves to say, and he always says it with a glint, is when he does something that Ruby didn't do or couldn't do. So Ruby never rode a champion chase winner for Willie Mullins. Paul Townend has rode 2. Ruby never rode a Gold Cup winner for Willie Mullins. Paul Townend has rode 4. Nobody rode a Gold Cup winner for Willie Mullins before Townend did on album photo. So he's ticked a hell of a lot of boxes in the last couple of years, and the quality of his rides on the biggest occasions. I'm thinking of I Am Maximus in the Irish National, I Am Maximus in the Aintree Grand National, Galopin Des Champs in his first Gold Cup, like nerveless stuff. Like, he is ice cold, in fairness to him. And it's funny, Mullins always said that Townend nearly operates best when he's had a bollocking or made a mistake. And that happened. That's happened a couple of times in recent years. And I remember Willie having kind of choice enough words about. He was actually on Lossiemouth in the Dublin Racing Festival, and it was like, is there a bit of tension here? Townend goes on to have this remarkable couple of weeks after, like crazily successful. So it would probably be Townend, I'd say. But I wouldn't be encouraging anyone to put their mortgage anywhere near a horse.
And I forgot Danny Mullins as well. We've reeled off a whole lot of jockeys, and Danny Mullins slipped my mind for a moment. Who's, he's Mr. Pretty Reliable as well, isn't he?
Yeah.
Do you know what Danny is as well, Joe? Danny's we're probably lacking characters. Like, Danny had braids in his hair at the Listowel Festival last year. He's got quite long hair, and he's a really interesting fella. He doesn't drink or anything like that, but he just is very colourful, very well spoken. He does ice baths every second day down to he goes from his neck down. He's really ultra prepared and ultra professional. And he's ridden 28 Grade 1 winners without any of them being a favourite, which is Father Tony told me recently, which is an unbelievable stat. He'll be on some second string, maybe third string for Willie Mullins, and history has shown us as well that there's a fair chance of them, a few of them hitting the bullseye this week too.
It's true. Half the reason I asked is because in this era now, and maybe in part it's because of the diminished presence of racing across kind of your typical mainstream general sports media. But I think certainly this side of the Irish Sea, if you said to people, name a current jockey now, I think Rachel Blackmore would be the first name, and then people would kind of struggle in the main a little bit. This next batch haven't quite grabbed the public imagination just yet, I'd say.
Yeah, you're probably right. And a lot of that, like, that's what one reason, and I'm glad Cornelius brought up Danny. Danny's actually very active on social media. He does a really good thing in association with the Tote every week. It's called Danny's Diary, where he does like a video interview, answers questions from punters, etc. Now, I doubt he'd respond to somebody who's given out about a ride he gave in a horse that didn't win, like any of us would. But he's very out there. He's got 25,000 followers on X, about 20,000 on Instagram, and he's quite active. Rachel would be a lot more kind of guarded in that regard, and would much prefer to just do her talking on the track or whatever. Going to be interesting as well. She is flying in under the radar this year, but a lot of Henry's horses have been kind of given quiet times, maybe run over Christmas time, thinking of a horse like Work Ahead in the Supreme, given a good bit of time off, and will be ready to take off the shackles at Cheltenham. And he has proven himself consistently in the last decade that he has his horses right for Cheltenham. They go through that mid-season kind of little bump, but he always has them right for Cheltenham. And I'd be very surprised if he's not on the vicinity with a couple of big race winners as well next week.
Okay, fellas. Well, we'll start on Tuesday 1:20, very appropriately, with the Michael O'Sullivan Supreme Novices Hurdle, and then re-emerge on Friday, and we'll see how everyone's doing. So Michael Verney will be there for the Irish Independent, covering the racing across the week. And Cornelius Lysaght, I presume you live nearby. I presume you'll be there.
Hopefully, God willing.
Very good.
Fingers crossed.
Okay.
And it's worth just bearing in mind, there is one logistical thing about the festival this year, whether you're watching from afar or attending, is that the feature race of the day has gone back a race. So the 4 o'clock is now the feature. Forever, it's been sort of around 3:15, 3:30.
What do you think of that, Cornelius? I'm not a fan. I liked it. I like it in the middle.
I think it's probably been done for television, I would imagine. I don't actually know the answer. And I'm not sure it's going to do. I think if I was a commuter who had nothing to do with racing in Cheltenham, I don't think I'd be over the moon, because I suspect the traffic, it can't help the post-racing traffic. Admittedly, that's only one part of the whole thing, but that is what they've decided to do. But personally, I'd rather it was right in the centre. But anyway, that is what they're doing, and it would be one won't be missing the race by tearing home to watch the feature at about 3:20. But equally, it is now at 4 o'clock. Worth just bearing in mind.
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay, fellas, thank you both so much. Enjoy Cheltenham. It's upon us from Tuesday. Thanks, Cornelius Lysaght and Michael Verney.